This is the Collector Car Podcast, the home for the auto enthusiast. Join Greg Stanley as he applies over 25 years of insights and analytical experience to the collector car market. He will interview the experts and throw in some fun stuff as well.
Okay, today I'm very excited to have Stu Morris on. Stu, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. How are you, Greg?
Doing great. I'm so happy you're here. You've got a really cool event. You actually work at America's Packard Museum.
Yes, sir.
And you have a really cool event coming up. So I guess a couple things here. Why don't you tell us what is the event, what's going on, and tell us what do you do at the Packard Museum there?
Okay, well, let me just kick it off by introducing myself. My name is Stu Morris. Like you've already said, I am the Operation and Collections Manager here, which is kind of a fancy way of saying I just do everything around here. Some days I'm fixing the restroom. Some days I'm working on, a six-figure Packard. Some days I'm writing articles. Some days I'm doing a podcast. So, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of some. What the event we're having coming up is the Packard Spring Fling. That is our annual gala event where it's a 2-day event. On Friday we have kind of the more of a mixer type mingling event. Also the unveiling of our new exhibit will be there. It's called Pole Position Packards. It's basically Packards at racing, and so it's various racing oriented Packards. For example, we are going to have the 1915 Indy pace car, the official pace car used for the Indianapolis 500 in 1915.
Wow.
We're going to have a 1912 Model 30 race car. We're going to have a couple of other things that we want people to come see. We're gonna have six Packard race cars in our showroom. If you're not familiar with our museum is a Packard dealership that was built in 1917, and we've kind of recreated what it would look like in its heyday, which was late 20s. It was kind of 1929-ish.
Just to be clear, you're in Dayton, Ohio?
Dayton, Ohio. Yeah, that's right. Downtown Dayton, Ohio, right off the highway. We're super easy to get to. And so we're in their showroom. We're going to put this new exhibit out. We're also going to have a couple of modern race cars next door, because we have two buildings. We have a post-war and a pre-war building. In the post-war building, we're going to have a couple of modern cars. That's where our Saturday night event is going to be. Our Saturday night event is going to be more of a sit-down formal dinner. We're going to have a keynote speaker of Price Cobb. Price Cobb won Le Mans in 1990. He's from Texas, I believe. And I could be wrong about that. So hopefully I'm not. Hopefully if I am wrong, we'll cut that. He is going to talk about his experiences during that time. So we'll have a couple modern race cars over there to kind of flank his speech. We're also going to have the Kim Kelly Orchestra, which is a big band. They're going to be doing swing. We're going to have a Sinatra, not an impersonator, but he doesn't impersonate Sinatra, but he mimics him extremely well. So we're gonna have the sounds of Sinatra over there as well. They're gonna be dancing. We're gonna have we'll have silent auctions, lots of stuff to do. We're also doing sessions in the morning about car restoration. As well, and we're also doing a tour of a private collector's racing car collection, which is mostly focused around Indy cars. That's going to be in the afternoon. So Saturday's packed full of stuff. It's going to be a really awesome event. We're getting really excited. There's still a lot of work to do, obviously, but we're getting there. We're seeing the end goal. It's going to be April 28th and 29th. Again, the Friday evening is going to be much more of a informal yet formal event where we're doing heavy hors d'oeuvres, cocktailing. There'll be a couple small events there as well, and then we're going to be doing the big gala on Saturday night. To find out about this, please go to our website, americaspackardmuseum.org. It should be under events, and you can buy tickets there. Or you can always call us at 937-226-1710. That's our landline here, and hopefully Christina will be there on the other end. Christina is our business manager, and she can take your order, or at least guide you through the process of buying tickets if you're interested in going.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I was able to attend last year, and I really enjoyed it. The Saturday night was amazing. The food was great. I love the band. I have a musical background, so I was really loving the big band thing going on there, and they were fantastic. So really cool setting, really cool event. I can't make it this year, unfortunately, because I will be taking my wife to a quilt show because I'm trying to be a
Oh,
good
that's right.
husband.
That's
So,
right. I remember that. Yeah. Well,
every weekend
that's
can't be
good.
cars,
That's while we're disappointed, I'm happy for you. I'm personally happy for you that you're doing your due diligence as a husband. That's great.
Right, right. Well, yeah, the point of this episode here is to talk about those 6 really cool Packards that you mentioned. I don't know if they're the 6 that are the race cars coming or others, but we
Well,
did want to review 6 cool cars, right?
yeah, absolutely. These actually the cars I've got on my list here are cars we have in the museum all of the time. So if you're coming across this episode much later than the event, I kind of wanted to have, kind of our staple cars.
Sure.
We have a lot of great cars. We have like 45 cars at any given time, so we have a pretty big collection. It's 44 Packards and 1 DeLorean because we wanted to try to make it so kids have some sort of connection to Packard and kind of the modern age, even though 1981 is not necessarily modern. But DeLorean worked for Packard it was his first job in the automotive industry, was working for Packard in 1953, designing transmissions.
So I love the fact that there's a connection there, that it makes sense, to have a DeLorean there. Sure.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And if you're listening to the podcast version, you can check out the YouTube version where I will have a video walk around of these cars that Stu is about to review, just so you can kind of see what they look like. And obviously, love to have you visit the museum anytime throughout the year.
Yes, please do. Please do. Well, should we get kicked off with some of the cars? Fabulous. I'm going to kind of go with a walk around of the museum. So it's kind of like the first car I'll talk about is essentially the first car you walk into when you come into the museum. The first car we have is the 1934 Super 8 dual cowl sport Phaeton.
Wow.
They loved making extremely long names back then, but basically it's a 1934 Super 8 is the best way to think about it as far as what the model was, but it was a lot more special than that. The car was debuted in the 1934 New York Auto Show, and this is during the time where you could go to an auto show and you can actually buy the cars at the auto show. You can't do that anymore, obviously, but. So this car was painted. It's a dual cowl Phaeton. So dual cowl means it has a windshield cowl area, and there's the cowl that's in front of the windshield where the windshield resides on, and in the back there's another section that looks extremely similar to that you flip up so the rear passengers can get into. So it's a very unique body style. The car is painted in Orello, which is a combination of orange and yellow, but it's much more like a butterscotch kind of color. So it's a very bright looking car, on top of having really interesting body work. The car remains largely original. The only thing that's not original is the fenders, but the body and the interior are all original, actually. It has the Super 8 engine, which is the one that's a step down from the 12. I personally prefer that. We'll talk about another one of these later on, but I prefer these cars because they're a lot simpler. They're a little bit lighter, which is kind of hard to think of Packard and lightness, but I like this. And also, the straight 8 is what Packard's really known for. Even though as we move along, they'll go into why they're known for a V12 as well. The car was bought by Herbert and Agnes Greer of Morgantown, West Virginia, and it was actually bought for their 16-year-old daughter.
Oh, and
when they got it there, she just didn't like the car. She just didn't care for it. And she thought it was too hard to drive. She thought it was too hard to park. Yeah, she didn't like the color. And a lot of people, when I tell them this story, they're like, wow, what a spoiled brat. But like, I've driven a lot of these pre-war Packards, and she's not exactly wrong. They're not easy to drive. I mean, if you're a 16-year-old girl and you weigh like a $105, I'm sure like looking over the steering wheel is probably not the easiest thing to do. There's no power steering, didn't come around until 1951. So it would be hard to park. And also the color of the car, which is kind of a slightly deeper yellow, is polarizing at best. So I mean, I tell this story to people and they're just always like, wow, what a brat. And I'm like, gotta put it kind of everything's in context here at the museum. Yes. So I love that car. It's one of our staples. this and another car I'm going to talk about in a minute kind of epitomizes what a pre-war Packard is. Yeah, 1934 is kind of one of the high water marks for a lot of people. There's people that are in the 1928 to 1930 kind of crowd. There's the 1934 crowd, and there's the 1937 crowd. And I think in 1934, this is kind of, in my opinion, this is one of the high, like I said, high watermarks of what a 1934 Packard is. And in the video, you'll definitely see what I mean by that.
Quick question. So Phaeton, is that 4-door window insert?
Yeah, exactly. So the Phaeton has is like a touring body, and touring body means it would have a top, but it'd have side curtains, no windows. Yeah, the convertible sedan would be the same setup, except for there would be removable posts and there'd be roll-up windows. So, and the Phaeton is a slightly shorter body than a touring. So that's why they call it a sport Phaeton. That's not sporty, I guess. There's not as much leg room in the back seat, so I suppose it's a little sporty because of that.
Right. Okay.
All right. One of the next cars that I think that is a lot of people's favorite cars here is the 1928 Jessie Vincent Speedster. Jessie Vincent was the guy who pioneered the V12 in the United States. He was the guy who essentially invented the idea of putting the V12 into a production car. Packard was the first company to do that. He was so prolific that the curator here at the museum is so tired of me saying this, but it was in 1919 when they were running the Indy 500. Enzo Ferrari was around, and he just became enamored with the V12 because of Packard, because of the way they sounded, and he just, he said the V12. I can't paraphrasing this a bit, and it was also translated from Italian, obviously. But he said, "I became married to the 12-cylinder engine, to which I was never divorced, because he just loved that engine so much because of Packard." Jessie Vincent wanted a really cool car to show off the Utica, Michigan test track that Packard had just built. And fun fact about the test track in Utica, it was the fastest closed course until 1954 when the oval was built at Monza. So it was,
wow.
It was a really technologically advanced track. But he wanted a car kind of to show off, the track and bring his friends. He knew Charles Lindbergh, and he had him drive that car. And he knew Amelia Earhart, and Amelia Earhart drove this car. But the car itself is the lightest frame he could get, with an aluminum torpedo body, a boat tail body on it. The biggest engine he could get it's got a big cam in it. It's got a straight 6-inch exhaust, well, a 6-inch opening, but it's a 3-inch exhaust to a 6-inch opening. It's a really rowdy car. I've taken it around a track before, and it's kind of scary, but it's a great car. I mean, there's nothing quite like it at the museum. It's got no fenders. It's got no lights. Jessie was spotted by the police a couple of times at night driving the car home, which he probably shouldn't be doing because there's no lights on it. And it's extremely loud. So, I mean, I'm sure he caused quite a commotion. But it's a fantastic automobile. It's definitely one of the more striking cars we have. And it's also one of the smallest.
Smallest, loudest, fastest. That's a good combination, right?
Yeah. It's not exactly a race car, but it does fit with the racing theme. So we're going to try to integrate it a little bit with our event, but it's more of a conversation about what Packard was at speed, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Next, let's try to move along here. The next car I wanted to talk about was our 1932 Twin Six, bodied by Murphy. That's a coach-built car. This is the first coach-built car we've talked about. This car was, like I said, it was bodied by Murphy. It's a convertible sedan, so it is the type that has the roll-up windows and the center post that you have to lock into place. I've actually did a stop motion not that long ago with it, of taking from it being a convertible and converting it into a sedan. It literally converts from a convertible to a sedan. Hence, convertible sedan. The car, it's aluminum bodied.
Wow.
Murphy did something like I always get this number slightly wrong. Did like 40% of Duesenberg bodies. They were based out of Pasadena, California. It's a cream color with a slight cream with black fenders. It's a twin six. That twin six was a rebranding of the original twin six that ran from 1916 until 1923. That was the one that Jesse Vincent put into production as the first V12 into a production car in the United States. And so they brought the name back in 1934. It's a significantly different engine. The reason why it's called a twin six is just basically the idea was if a six-cylinder engine is inherently balanced, then and perfect. So therefore a V12 must be even more perfect. So they called it a twin six. And this is also during the time where the crankshafts, the crankcase was separate from the cylinders, and all that stuff was all different. So they kind of called it a twin six instead, two banks of six cylinders on it. This is a completely different engine. It's a monoblock, massive lump, and they ran this engine until 1937. No, I'm sorry, 1939. I apologize. And it was kind of known as that was like the most expensive Packard you could get would be the twin six, and they dropped that name in 1933 and they just called it a 12. This car was owned by Gar Wood. Gar Wood was the guy who broke the 100-mile-per-hour barrier on the water. And he did that using a racing boat with Packard engines, big Packard V12 engines, which would eventually become the engine that was they based the PT boat engine on in World War II. A lot of that architecture transferred over. These were naturally aspirated. Eventually, the PT boat engine would be supercharged, which most all big engines were during that time. He had a really interesting saying that, if you're talking about Duesenberg, if you want to be somebody, you buy a Duesenberg. If you already are somebody, you buy a Packard.
And I knew we had to get that in here.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Love that quote. And as far as I know, and I could be extremely wrong about this, but I love this story anyway. Somebody high up at Packard, when when Garwood was looking to buy a car, he was looking at stuff that wasn't a Packard, and they said, "You can't do that. You've got to drive a Packard." So they gave him this car, and it's a really excellent piece. It's one of the biggest cars we have. It's almost 6,000 pounds. It's a massive, massive car. Incredibly cool. 147-inch wheelbase. I mean, it's just out of this world. This car and the we call it the Orello, the 1934 dual cowl Phaeton we talked about at the beginning. Those are kind of in my opinion, the two really standouts as far as the pre-war cars. We have a lot of excellent pre-war cars as well, but in my mind, it's all opinion, obviously, but these are the two that really stand out to me for whatever reason. We have a lot of excellent we have a 1930 Boat-tail Speedster, we have a 1930 convertible sedan by Brewster, we have a 1928 Hibbert and Darren that was built in France. We have a lot of really excellent pre-war cars, but these two, for whatever reason, they're just the ones that always stand out to me. And so I always really try to focus on them just because they have just there's an emotional connection. Cars are about emotional connection, and these two are really, really two of my favorites. I'm going to really briefly talk about the next car here, which is one of the earlier cars we have. It's actually not a car; it's a truck. It's a 1918 World War I Army truck.
Cool.
That still most every single car in this place runs, and this is no exception. The Army truck it represents Packard's war effort in World War I. It uses solid rubber tires. Its top speed is 17 miles per hour. I clocked it with a Mercedes one time, and it still runs. We do the Concord Elegance down at the Dayton History, which is, I want to say it's probably 2 miles down the road. Sure. Something like that. I drove it from our museum to there, and it took me about 20 minutes. So I mean, it's slow going with that thing. A lot of people want to slow down right next to you and take pictures with it. But you know, it represents Packard's many war efforts over the years, but one of its first because they supplied something like 10,000 trucks to the World War One, the Great War at that time was what they were calling it, war effort. And we have an excellent example of a restored one here that still runs. It's one of the few cars in the museum I can get in and just start and just drive, and it's actually pretty maneuverable. Believe it or not.
Right, yeah.
It's really epic. It's a really epic piece. We take it to events where, you know, we let kids crawl all over it and take pictures. They love it. We took it to the Touch a Truck event last year. We're just going to go again, and they loved it. It's got a horn you can rotate and make noise on and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. But it's one of our biggest and most unique pieces we have.
That's cool.
Yeah, so there's two more cars I want to talk about. These are in our post-war collection. The first one I want to talk about is our 1953 Caribbean. Packard made the Caribbean from 1953 until 1956, and the only time they made a hardtop was in 1956. We actually have every year and body style of Caribbean there, or Caribbean or Caribbean. I always go in between the two.
What did Packard say?
The Caribbean. It's Caribbean.
Okay.
Caribbean. This is an interesting car because it was kind of a coach built car. The Bentley Mitchell Corporation built them because the Packard knew they needed something to compete with the Cadillac Eldorado, the Oldsmobile Fiesta. I love that it was a Fiesta. I drive a Ford Fiesta as my beater car, and the Buick Skylark. And they needed something to compete with that because that's where people were going. They were going their Halo cars were these really expensive convertibles that were kind of custom cars. So the Mitchell Bentley Corporation, they kind of hand formed some of the pieces of these cars. They made the rears a little longer. They gave it a Continental spare with a Continental spare tray, and extended the bumpers out to accommodate that. They also gave it a hood scoop that was leaded in. It uses lead. It's crazy how heavy these hoods are. Uses the biggest straight eight they were still rocking a straight eight during that time. A lot of people say that was one of Packard's faults. Is even in the mid 50s they hadn't transitioned to the V8 yet. But I like the straight eight. There's something about it. It gives the car's character. It uses the automatic the Ultramatic that John DeLorean would eventually improve upon. Power everything. In this car it's finished in a flame red, so it's this bright red that almost has like a touch of orange to it. It's a really striking car. Wire wheels with white walls. Like, you really can't get much more 50s than one of the Caribbeans. But this one, because it was the first one, and also I just have a lot of sweat equity in this car. The car runs off of hydraulics, as it's still a 6-volt system, so all the windows are hydraulic. Obviously, the top is hydraulic.
Wow.
But I redid all the hydraulics in this car. One of my favorite things about working on the cars here was, this is one of my first big jobs, is one of the kick panels in the back seat. It has the guy's name who worked on it in 1985, the guy's name who worked on it in 1976. And then I got to put my name on it, which I just thought,
that's cool.
You can't, like, as a gearhead, that's kind of the coolest thing, The last car I wanted to talk about was our Pininfarina Parisian Coupe. This is a 1952. They never made this car. The gentleman who acquired the Jessie Vincent Speedster also had a penchant for building Packards that never were. His name was Carl Schneider. It's Carl Schneider. He has been a big supporter of the museum for a very long time. He found the plans for this car and I think it's the I can't remember what it was, but it was some auction in Paris in the mid 90s. Because what had happened was that Pininfarina came over to the United States and gave his designs to a bunch, design cars for a bunch of manufacturers, and one of them was Packard. Packard realized this car was going to be incredibly expensive to produce. They were thinking it was going to be something like 15 grand to sell one.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
the Caribbean hadn't even come out yet, and the Caribbean sold for just under 5 grand. So you're talking about like an extremely, probably something like, what um a really high-end European car, like I don't even know if Bugatti was around at this point still, but something like what a Ferrari would have cost during that time. I mean, it was
Right.
incredibly expensive, so they never made it. But the car is completely custom. It's got custom fenders on it. It's got a custom hood. I think the only thing that's standard about the car is the tours. A lot of people liken it to an American DB5 because it kind of has those vibes a little bit. It's
Sure.
silver. It's silver. I think has a lot to do with it, but it has that fastback design. It's got kind of those kind of the fins that a DB5 has in the back as well. And it has it's silver, finished in silver with a green leather interior.
Oh, great
And
colors. Yeah.
it's just a fantastic car. It turns so many heads when you drive it. I mean, it's one of the most elegant cars. A lot of people ask, like, why do they make this car? And it's just like, I mean, I'm like, if you look at it, this car shares zero sheet metal besides the doors with anything
Yeah.
else that Packard had. I mean, it was just such a radical design. And it's definitely one of the standouts in our post-war collection for sure, for sure. So I hope that, yeah, that's all. That's all 6 of the cars I have. I'm hoping. Did you have any questions about any of the cars that I?
No, it's really cool that you covered 6 cars, kind of, like you said, you start at the front of the building, you kind of
Yeah.
walk through, you're giving us a little tour of those 6 cars that are there on permanent display.
Hmm.
And now, you know what, folks have a wonderful reason to visit you to see, the race cars that you have on a temporary exhibit,
Yeah.
so it's great. I love the cars that you picked for this. And, I have to talk about where you are. Are you in the library right now? Are you in
No, I'm
your
in my
office?
office. I'm in my
Okay.
office.
A lot of cool stuff behind you.
Yeah.
And I know your library is really outstanding.
Yes.
Give our folks a little overview of kind of what's in that thing. That library is just amazing.
So a while back, we got donated the entirety of the automobile quarterly research library, and it's something like I want to say it's something like 20,000 books or to that effect. On every different mark. From from Stoddard Dayton all the way up and up till the modern GTOs. We have a lot of really interesting books that people can borrow. We're now essentially a public library. And we're slowly growing what that looks like because we have just so much stuff. It was so much stuff. And we have volunteers that work on it every single week. They're filing books away and putting them in the system, and it's just a really excellent library. It was started from the Robert and Sonia Turnquist Foundation, and we named the library after them. And it's really a great place to come if for anything, if for any kind of mark to come look at what we have to offer. We also have an extremely comprehensive set of Packard materials as well. Most of it is service manuals, some even dating back to 1914. So it's I use that stuff all the time. So it's a really excellent resource.
Do,
It is.
do you know what the oldest piece of literature you have in the
Oh,
library?
it's got to be well beyond 1905, I would assume. I'm
Wow.
not
Yeah.
sure. I mean, we have lots of really I mean, even beyond that. I mean, there's just so much stuff there. It's so much to pour over that it requires the attention of a lot of people.
Right.
But it's a
Yeah.
really excellent library. Um, we have a really excellent development director, Mark Fargus, who has a background in libraries and has helped us immensely with his job is to help us raise money, so we are a nonprofit, but he has an extensive background in libraries who has really helped us kind of modernize what our library looks like, and it's done a great job in the short time he's been here.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the Collector Car Podcast. Sorry I
Yeah,
won't be there in person, but I'll
that's
be there
okay.
in spirit.
Absolutely. Well, we'll miss you. Will be plenty of pictures, but you got to come next time. That's the only thing I ask.
I know. I'll put it a year in advance. I'll be there. Okay.
Okay. All right. Cool.
All right. Thanks, Stu.
Absolutely. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the Collector Car Podcast. Don't forget to give us a nice rating on iTunes and be sure to follow us on Instagram and everywhere else at the Collector Car Podcast.